Hello and welcome to the Creators series. Authors, speakers, poets, artists, inspirationists all around us. I am Pravin Shekar, an outlier marketer and a raconteur. This series is brought to you by Can Do, a social entity skilling and employing people with disabilities. Talk to them for relationship mapping, competitor tracking, and connecting with the right decision makers. This series is supported by Notion Press, one of the fastest growing publishing platforms in the world. If you've got a story to tell, Notion Press will get it out. Our guest today is Hamsini Shivakumar, a person whom I've had the privilege of knowing for over a decade. We have a common bond called the wider world of market research and consumer insights. Hamsini is a co-founder of Leapfrog Strategy Consulting, one of India's premier brand consulting companies. She's also the co-founder of Semiofest, an unconference for applied semiotics practitioners. She will tell you what semiotics is, so hold your horses there. Prior to starting Leapfrog, Hamsini was the strategy head at JWT Mumbai and the regional planning director for Asia at Unilever. Her 25-year career spans consumer insights, brand strategy, communication planning, and innovation. She's a prolific writer on consumer and brand issues in international and Indian publications. Hamsini, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi, Praveen. Thank you. What a lovely show, and I'm privileged to be part of this show.
Oh, it's privileges all mine. When I got your book, Signs, Symbols, and Marketing Effectiveness, a beginner's guide to semiotics for marketing, Hamsini, I fell in love with it from the cover through to the images and the way it's been conveyed. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And thank you very much for coming out with a book like this.
Well, it was the first effort, and actually all credit for the design should go to my design partner, Pranab Bobo Datta, who's also featured at the back, because I had a thought, but it is his design capability that translated it into this finished version, which has really hooked you.
It is. Having been a part of the research world, I'm familiar with what semiotics is, but for our viewers and listeners, Hamsini, could you tell us a bit more about semiotics and the connection with marketing?
Okay, think of it this way. Suppose in front of you, there were 3 cups. Okay, one was a bone china teacup, one was a Kullad chai cup, and the third was a paper cup, right? Now, the way you perceive and use these 3 cups for drinking tea would be totally different, right? You will sip gently and very polished manner from the bone china cup and place it very daintily, and you will have it with sliced, cake and scones. Whereas with that paper cup, you might just glug it down, crush it, and throw it. And the Kullad chai, you might, drink it differently. You might slurp it while you drink the Kullad chai, right? Which you might not do. Definitely, you won't slurp if you're drinking from the bone china cup. So
true, very true.
Why is it that we respond differently to these 3 products? They don't come with an instruction manual. They are not teaching you how to use it. None of it, right? When you see it, it immediately communicates to you via signs. You are interpreting the signs. So each product is embedded or encoded with signs. You are interpreting the signs, and then you're making meaning out of those signs. And from that, you're drawing the inferences on what is the right way to use it, the right way to keep it, how to drink from it, etc., etc. And then each product, because of the way the signs are constructed, they also pull you into a certain collective imaginary and an imagined world. Actually, could be a real world too, but the Kullad chai you connected with railway journeys in North India and railway stations, and the boys who might come and sell you chai, etc. The paper cup is just a necessity. It could be anywhere, and you can have it. Whereas the bone china teacup goes along with the English afternoon tea and scones and their cultural ritual of tea, etc. So the point is, the product is not just a product, right? It's encoded. It comes encoded with signs that we interpret, and then it is placed, let's say, into a larger collective imaginary and a world of which it is one representation. There can be many such, and it is one such representation. So this is just to tell you what semiotics as a discipline studies. It actually studies how we make meaning in the world around us. So the world in which we live, which semioticians would call a semiosphere, like there's the atmosphere and ecosphere and all of that. So it's a semiosphere. So the social and cultural world, actually even the natural world, is actually comprises signs, symbols, narratives, so there are verbal signs, visual signs, there are stories in infinite number of formats. So we are constantly interpreting them to make meaning and make sense of the world around us. And that is because of the learning that we are put through. So we are constantly learning and unlearning the meaning of signs and concepts that we are taught. And we are relearning new things, and new concepts are also being created through a kind of a natural collective effort. Let's put it that way. Because we are all members of that culture, we are all constantly contributing to that through our conversation, through our ideas, through our creativity, etc., etc. So it's a semiosphere is vast. It's not tamed and controlled, and it cannot be tamed and controlled, and it's constantly in flux and change. And we are all participating in it. We are producing, we are contributing, we are doing everything with it. So semiotics is a discipline that says, okay, how do we, beyond common sense that everybody has, if we were to try and decode and understand this semiosphere in in different ways, how would we go about doing that? What are the theoretical concepts? What are the tools? What are the frameworks, etc.? So a semiotician basically thinks more deeply about meaning production, interpretation, what actually happens. So how do we make sense of the world in which we live? That's why I personally love it, because it sits at the intersection of many different disciplines, right? So it overlaps with philosophy, because philosophy asks questions about what is the nature of things, how do we know something, right? It also intersects with language, because language is the largest and most powerful symbolic creation. If you compare Homo sapiens with all other animals, the greatest creation of Homo sapiens is language, right? So that language enables symbolic expression. Without language, it's very difficult to engage in symbolic expression. So
Beautiful.
it overlaps with linguistics. It also overlaps with anthropology, because it is connected to culture. So it sits at the intersection of multiple disciplines. So, and it's endlessly fascinating, because culture is endlessly fascinating.
It's absolutely fascinating. But Hamsini, from there to consulting for your clients and brands to this book, how did that happen?
Well, I've been working in semiotics for a long time and trying to explain to people what it is, etc., etc. Then I thought, okay, if the applications in marketing, I should write something which is very simple. And there were three ideas in my mind when I sat down to create this book along with Bobo. First, I said, okay, the marketer is bombarded with so much information, they don't have time to process it, or inclination to sit and process it at great depth. They might, if the writer is some very well-known American big name, then they might put the effort, but otherwise they wouldn't. The second thing, so therefore I said, okay, that's one thing to keep in mind. Second, I said, okay, I must write something which, if a marketer is on a flight and he's got 40 minutes and says, okay, I want to spend my 40 minutes learning something, but not without too much hard work. So I wanted to make something that's enjoyable to browse, etc., etc. And the third thing I had in mind was that it must be visual, because a lot of semiotics textbooks or writing is very dry and very, abstract and abstruse, and it just sort of makes very everyday commonsensical things unnecessarily complex. So it's sort of, immediately marketing people are, at the end of the day, are people of action, right? Their final question is, okay, after all this gyan, batao karna kya hai? I can do these 3 things or 4 things. Now tell me which out of these 4 I should do, and karke what result aayega. This,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
the rest of it is okay, nice intellectual conversation, good for corridor conversation, time pass, jo bhi hai. But it's not really material to the actual doing of the marketing. So that's also a reason why I felt that I should simplify it. I should remove all the jargon. I should make it as visual as possible and design it in a way in which it kind of lands for you when you look through it, and then make you kind of draw some connections in your mind by asking these questions, provocations, and said, okay, now reflect for yourself. So I pointed this one thing out to you. Now it's up to you, if you find it interesting, extend it into other realms and figure some things out for yourself. That's how this book was born, and that's how it was created.
Oh, and it is a success. It is a success because I read and reread it, not to understand, but just to enjoy it even more. And I sent across a copy to my designer as well. Like you have Bobo, I have Arun Ramkumar from Mojo Canvas, who does a lot of work for my books. And I said, hey, listen, I love this. Have a look at it. And I love the way you have put wearing a marketer's hat and seeing with the semiotician's eye. I would invite you to dwell a little bit more on this. This is beautiful, and you've carried that thread all through a marketer's hat with a semiotician's eye.
Yeah, well, why I kind of put it in that simple way is to say, actually, semioticians not only see, but they also sense and hear, and so all the senses could be involved. But largely speaking, meaning making is the strongest metaphor or analogy is with seeing and insight and all of that. So that's why I wrote Semioticians Eye, because once you have a trained semiotician's eye, you always see beyond what is on the surface. You look beyond and beneath what is on the surface, because you look for each of the signs and what are they telling you, and why is it put together like this, and how do they come together, and how do they link into culture. So you're always joining the dots in different ways to see what comes out. So that's why the semiotician's eye. But since this is not a parlor game for being done for the fun of it, and it actually has to be effective in marketing terms, so that's why saying, okay, you marketer, I know you're wearing your marketer's hat, but if you were to put on the semiotician's eye along with your marketer's hat, then this is what you would see. And this is how then you would be able to make more sense of what you do and what is around you.
Good. Now, the next question, which I'm very curious about, Hamsini, is about the writing process. I've published 7 books. So if you ask me to write, I'll sit and write. But in your case, you have captured the essence, which means you would have had to cut out and leave out a whole lot to transfer. I'm very curious to know about your writing process for this particular book. And the final product, I keep telling it, I love it, Hamsini. But I'd love to know your writing process here.
Well, it was just like this. I wrote, then I rewrote, then I edited. Then I always kept in mind that less is more. So it was actually a lot of process of writing, rewriting, editing. Then after Bobo laid it out in the book format, then when you see it in that format, you have to do another round of editing, because what it looks like on your Word document or on the slide, in the document form, but then when translated into this visual form, does it read quite the same way? Does it need some more fine tuning and editing? So it did go through a couple of rounds of, I would say, editing and fine tuning.
Good. Now, you talk about signs and symbols, and you've also given a lot of examples to enable people like me, marketers like me, and entrepreneurs to understand that. Now, if we have to, as a marketer, and I understand the book, but I am having a problem that I have to work with the team always, whether it is a brand team or a management team or a go-to-market, whichever we look at. How do I translate your book for the other people? Do I just give a copy of the book, or how do I translate it? Because if I get it, how do I ensure they get it as well?
Give them copy of the book because or otherwise I have to do a 1.5 hour kind of a workshop which takes the content of the book and puts it across to them. So either they read it themselves or they are put through a 1 hour or 1.5 hour session where they are taken through the main ideas which are in the book. There isn't any other way.
Right.
I had
Now,
a long discussion with an American professor that I had met of semiotics not last year, 2019. I'd gone to Buenos Aires for the global academic semiotics congress. So one American professor there, he saw me, and because I'm an Indian lady sitting there, he said, "Hey, why don't we make an app?" So he sort of assumed that because I'm Indian, software is my sort of, in blood or in my DNA or something. So he said, "Oh, how cool it would be to make an app." So I said, "Yeah." So I guess that's Vinny. I'm just wandering a little off the point here, but also I think today as an author sometimes, because at the end of the day, when you write a book or when you put your ideas down, it's finally you are having a conversation with the reader, and the reader is having a conversation with you in taking into, or grappling with or thinking about the ideas or insights that you want to convey and put across to the reader. So it is a book. In the end, according to me, it's a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's a dialogue. It's not like a dialogue like we are having, but in a way, if the reader has taken in the ideas that you have proposed and plays with it in his or her own mind, then the dialogue has happened, right? If that has not happened, then the dialogue hasn't happened.
Right. But in this case, when I
Today,
picked it,
as an author, you actually have a wide range of tools in which you can put across your ideas. So does it have to be a book? Is it an app? Is it some other format? So those are questions actually that come up repeatedly, I think, now compared to earlier. It was just very simple and clear that, okay, you wrote a book.
I absolutely agree with you, Hamsini, because right now it is the age of knowledge disseminators, which takes up various forms.
Yeah.
This particular interview discussion that we are having, Hamsini, is also one of that, where
Yeah,
I will
exactly.
learn, but so also those connected into me. So when I'm a marketer, therefore the book jumped at me from the title. Therefore, I assumed it has been written for the likes of me, which is the marketing department. But it is like the washing machine used for lassi case, Hamsini, your book. The more and more I read and talk about it, anybody involved in the creative space, entrepreneurs, those who are influencers, and therefore need to be aware of the science and the symbology associated and then taking it through. And of course, my most favorite part, and also thanks to my teenage daughter who's a lot into mythology and the symbols associated, there's so much meaning that is there, some explicit and some rather implicit or has to be explained. But long-winded question to ask you, whom did you write the book for?
Yeah, well, my primary audience was a marketing person. Anybody who works in marketing and who's involved in marketing and marketing communication in the larger sense. So design people, creative people, journalists, content writers. So the larger marketing ecosystem was my primary audience. It's not so much written for the researcher or the consumer insights audience, because then, I would have had to write it far more aligned to the frameworks of research, right? Then I would have to write a lot more contrasting it with qual research, contrasting it with quant research, putting the three, comparing it, etc., etc., which I didn't do. So a researcher would, a consumer insights researcher might find the book relevant when they are wearing their marketer's hat rather than if they are wearing their researcher hat.
Yeah.
Is what I would
Oh,
say.
I'm a big believer that all of us are marketers. We're just hiding ourselves into something else. But I'm going to relate to an answer you gave earlier for the marketer or the entrepreneur who's got a 40-minute flight and wants to get some gyan in that, which is spot on, especially in today's attention deficit audience that we are looking at. Beautiful. Now that leads me to two questions. One is, how was it collaborating with Bobo to come out with the book? What was your experience like?
See, Pranam and I have worked together for many years before this. We have worked on client projects, we have worked on other projects. So we have a very good rapport. I understand his way of working and he trusts me as well. So we have a good collaboration. And so the process was very easy and smooth. Second thing is Pranam himself started his design career as a design person doing magazines. So he he worked at India Today, he worked at Outlook, he worked at Tehelka, even now he does Swarajya, he did till recently, etc. And therefore his experience in doing books, magazines, and that format is very high. So therefore it was a very easy collaboration. Like I couldn't have thought of creating this with anybody else. Because if you don't have that sort of complete mental match, you can't co-create. So I would say like this book went beyond just collaboration. It actually was a co-creation. So in that co-creation, it requires a different level of understanding between the two people, you know.
Good. What next? Is there a sequel in the works? What's going on?
Well, I have half of a sequel written, 6 chapters, and then I haven't completed it. So it's high time I got off my and finished it and got it out.
I'm putting my hand up to be a part of your advanced reading tribe. So.
Oh, okay, super. Thank you. So I guess one of the challenges also is I would love some input from you on this since you have done 7 and you're on to your 8, etc. Is each time the question of, okay, who am I writing for, and how will it help them, and it's how are they to use it, how will it help me in my larger agenda of popularizing semiotics. So each time you kind of think about it, and then sometimes I also feel daunted because there's so much in the world already, so is what I have to say, how relevant is it, kind of a thing. So you do some writing when you're at least that's what happens to me. I do the writing when I'm in that sort of charged mood where I feel, I have a lot to say and I must say it and get it down. And then that charge kind of recedes a bit. And then some of these questions come back. So how did you deal with this question on?
Oh, I have built a small tribe, and that is my primary audience, Hamsini. So I've got about 250, 300 people who consume everything I write, and therefore I focus a lot more on writing specifically to this, which is startups who've grown significantly and are in that cusp of leaving startup and getting into the growth model. So I write for such growth stage CEOs, CXOs, and marketers, and bulk of my books and writing and communication is towards that. So if somebody asks me, is it a bestseller on Wall Street Journal? I said, I'm not writing for those guys. I'm writing for a different set. And there the feedback is immediate. It is also a string of pearls that each of the book, 5 of the 7 are marketing books and they are interconnected. So each one goes straight through. So I write for a very small focused tribe who then become my super promoters and spread the word. So.
No, okay, that's actually given me a very good idea, because the thing is, if you know your audience and they care about what you have to say, then that's the greatest motivator, right?
And for me, when people ask me how many books have been sold, I turn the question around saying, ask me how much money, revenue I have made off the book. because the bulk of it, when they resonate, it comes back as consulting assignments. It comes back for coaching or audits and the like, Hamsini. So that old model of selling the book as the only metric is gone.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, for people like us, I mean, the book, as I said, that's why I said the book is a dialogue with the reader. That's all. It's a way to get across your thoughts to a reader who could find it engaging and interesting. So then it is really about finding your audience and then writing for them. And then if they like your ideas, they'll come back to you in some other form, in some other way. They'll want to continue the conversation. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's, I guess, especially since we are not writing fiction, which is a completely different ballgame altogether. Maybe you have written a fiction book and I haven't read it yet.
I have written one under a pen name, so it doesn't mess with my.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to ask you a completely different question on the concept of micro market, where if you're aware or have you consulted or worked with any client who's worked on a very small niche local market, which is geofenced, for a smaller tribe rather than somebody bigger. Do you have any examples or thoughts on micro marketing?
Well, only in a very limited way, because like most of my official clients who commission semiotics work are very large corporates. So they don't really kind of fit into this. I mentor some organizations, actually two organizations in the social entrepreneurship space. So one is called Karma Healthcare and they do telemedicine. And they were doing telemedicine much before. Now, because of COVID, telemedicine has really kind of, got much more credibility than it had earlier. So he therefore has, because each center, it's a center and then, there is a nurse and it's an assisted telemedicine model. So each center then has its own catchment. And hence, actually, I have worked very closely with him in that marketing and try to figure out what works, what doesn't. And these are all rural context villages which are within, let's say, a 25 to 50 kilometer radius from a city. So, Rajasthan centers were, because he's based out of Udaipur. So, within a radius of Udaipur. Here also he has centers which are within a certain radius of Gurgaon. So that's been his model. So there we have tried or done, micro marketing, which is really within that kind of radius. So I would have to say micro marketing is much tougher than high level macro marketing. Because, to get that mix right and which ones do you use and how will it, go into their purchase funnel and how will you calculate ROI of your marketing effort. So all of that, in fact, you have to almost think of it from zero base and work and try it out and all that. So there is actually, it's very much a learning process is what I figured with him. The other is an education NGO which works with, government school children in Delhi, but who are in this 10th, 11th, 12th and beyond. So how to help them transition to careers or jobs and careers that are more aligned to their own strengths and capabilities. So how do you equip them to think beyond daily wage work or, very small kind of work, which is their backgrounds are some very often from that kind of a context. But they are the, young generation who are trying to transition from that very everyday casual labor, small work, father is a gardener, mother is a home, somebody who works cleaning houses, that sort, or slightly better, etc. And then, but who can actually become something else. So their NGO is set up to help these kind of children and make the transition and all that. So they now are trying to do through social media, communication that connects with these children above and beyond their classroom or their program-led engagement with them. So they've just hired this young girl, and I'm in fact just starting to work with her on using social media to do this sort of marketing, micro marketing, you could call it, with them.
Yes. Lovely.
But I would say, so for me, micro marketing actually has been a complete learning experience. I've sort of had to keep aside all the general gyan and sort of work from first principles of marketing and of communication to figure out what works, what doesn't, how do you track it, etc., etc.
Beautiful. Hamsini, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for spending this much time with us. For all the viewers and listeners, well, this is the book. Go check out leapfrogstrategy.com. Google Hamsini Shivakumar to check out her books and to ask her loads of questions about semiotics. But read the book beforehand. I'm in love with the book and I'm happy to recommend it. All of you, thank you very much. And thank you once again, Hamsini.
Thanks a lot, Pravin. I'm so delighted that you loved the effort. That's very, very gratifying. So it just tells me, okay, onward and forward to the next. All right. Super. Thank you so much.